I want to now get into exhaust gas temperatures and talk a little bit about it before I start writing some notes. So your small planes, your little 150s and stuff, they never came with an exhaust gas temperature gauge. But the more complicated the aircraft becomes, the more expensive it is, the more instrumentation you get, and you start getting more and more gauges. The 182 had an option for an EGT gauge, which meant that it measured one source of exhaust gas temperature. Things have progressed, and now, I have the 6 probe cylinder head temps, 6 probe exhaust gas temps. You're monitoring them all, and that'd be pretty common for anything fuel injected. You have a JPI, I think, right, or something similar. What's that? J-3. Yeah, and what do you have? Anything on yours? Nothing.
It's on my wish list.
Yeah. So, all right. So the original EGT gauges look like this one right here. And the interesting thing about that is, note the numbers.
Yes.
Zoom in, please.
Note the numbers. Let me see. Where's my magnifying glass? There you go.
Better.
Note the numbers.
25 degrees per division.
That's it. Well, then what is this over here and what is that over there? Well,
What's the asterisk?
okay, when you, yeah, it's a read manual. Now, when you buy a gauge like, and this is the original, so you buy a gauge like this and a probe, and so the probe is then going to go in the exhaust somewhere, and the reason why there are no numbers is because the actual numbers are irrelevant. The only time a measurement in the exhaust system has any relevance at all is if it's the turbine inlet temperature. And when we talk about turbine engines, not turbine engine, but a turbocharged engine, you need to be aware of the temperature of the exhaust hitting the turbine wheel on a piston engine. So if it's a turbine inlet temperature gauge, it will have a red line. Other than that, it doesn't matter. It is what it is. You take off at full power, that's your EGT. It just tells you what it is. Okay? And so you buy this particular gauge here, and you'll notice there's like a slot right here. And there's another hole right there. Okay, this slot right here, all it does is it moves that yellow reference line back and forth, easy to get to. This does come with a nice little screwdriver that fits in that little tiny hole, little plastic screwdriver. And what you do is you simply calibrate this in flight so that the highest gas pressure you get is the asterisk. That's just, so you have to test fly it.
Would that mean move that yellow bar?
You get the yellow bar is a reference.
Okay.
It's this needle here. So you take off and you go flying. And now exhaust gas temperature is varied by the pilot with the mixture.
Okay.
Because mixture is time. And it's also power. So what you're doing is you're moving the mixture out and you're going to watch this white needle start to climb. Now, maybe it was right here when you're out, go up to 2,000 feet and start leaning it out. And you'll see this go higher and higher and higher and higher, and then it starts going back the other way. Now start getting cooler and cooler as you got leaner. So you went up and you found this spot where EGT was the highest, exhaust gas temp was the highest. So you go back to where it was the highest, and then you put your screwdriver in there, and you just turn it till this white needle lines up on there. That's what the asterisk meant. It's like your highest spot. And then the yellow line is just an easy reference. That yellow line now references 75 degrees cooler than peak. Follow so far? This is very important.
So you said the leaner the mixture, the higher the exhaust gas temperature?
No, I did not.
Okay.
When you start leaning, the exhaust gas temperature gets higher and higher and higher and higher. And keep leaning, it starts going back the other way.
Oh.
So there's a point where we could say we've reached a best mixture that is extracting the most work energy out of the fuel. Therefore, the fuel is burning the hottest and the most complete burn, which would give us the hottest exhaust. Okay, I want to be careful how I say that because there's some things about that aren't true at all. But if you can start by picturing that, okay? And you say, oh, well, when I reach that point right there, well, that's kind of like best power. All right.
So each,
Look, I'm going to get back into that just a little bit more with a chart and a graph and kind of explain it better. But where I want to go right now is, okay, this is exhaust gas. We're measuring it. The actual number has no relevance. That's why the original EGT gauges had no numbers. The guy who thought this up thought, who cares what the number is? You don't need to know.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean anything. All right, so, I've got my airplane and I've installed my system. And if you had the exact same airplane and we're one serial number and one end number off, and you're like, Kevin, how come your EZGs are all like 75 degrees higher than mine? It just is. Good chances are when I put mine in, I was more careful measuring it to this, and you got yours a little lower, and I got mine a little higher. Because EGT, the number has once the engine is, say, it peaked out, right? So once we reach peak EGT, well, it's the placement of the probe that really matters at that point as to what the temperature is. Move it up, it's going to get hotter. Move it down, it's going to get lower. So installation has a lot to do with what the numbers are. Okay, so never get hung up on the absolute EGT numbers. They're not important. I guess the important thing is that you understand that exhaust gas temperature is somewhere between 1,700 to 1,400 degrees, depending on where it's like 1,700 close to cylinder. It's 1,400 about that far down. It cools off. Not only that, they're puffs, so it's an average anyway. So anyway, just takeaway is that on this particular one. As EGTs have advanced, they've gone into monitoring them all, and these are antiquated at this point. I had this one in my Cessna 150. I had one side with CHT, one side is EGT. Now this is what they look like. Yeah.
Are the numbers on the other ones just said like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
Yeah.
Is that probes? Or
Yes.
Is that,
Cylinders. Cylinder 1 through 6.
okay, so it's cylinders 1 through 6.
Cylinders 1 through 6.
Okay.
And I don't like these because see how there's that space right there?
Yeah.
Okay, that space, that is a CHT temperature right there. Then it's space EGT. I know. I'm like, yeah, I don't love that because this EGT is actually matching that EGT, but because that CHT is lower, it moved the whole bar down some. I guess, I don't know. May not be that way. I think it's really red across the top. So that was a direct readout. Sometimes these EGT numbers cause more problems than not because as a mechanic dealing with an owner, they want to know, well, why are my EGTs aren't the same? Well, probes, sometimes the probe gets like this, sometimes it's like that. Sometimes the probes are pushed in too far, sometimes they're not. Anyway, this is a modern. That's the one I have in my airplane, the EDM 930. So you can see right here, EGT is right here. And then not only do you get a bar graph, but it's called out in numbers. T is for turbine, so this would be like a turbocharged 182 or something. But anyway.
So on a digital, are the numbers still not important?
Not important.
Okay.
It's completely irrelevant.
Got it.
You reference them though, because you get like on this digital gauge, I can't tell when I peaked except by looking at the numbers. Because if I'm looking at this one, it goes 1550, 1560, 1550, 1540. I'm like, oh, 1560 was the peak.
Because there's no dial. Okay.
There's no dial to look at.
Right.
And then what is CHT?
Cylinder head temperature. So yeah, cylinder head temperature, exhaust gas temperature. Everything else.
It'll tell you if you got a dead cylinder.
Yes, it will. This is really good for diagnosing a lot of things, and we're going to get more into this. I want to just and then get back into it. Okay. So I love this chart here. I've modified this to make it work for us a little bit, added lines and stuff. Okay, so let's start with our green. What do you want to do? Let's just walk around the chart a little bit. Let me show you what we're looking at. I added the colored lines going vertically. So this is out of a IO 550, so it's a fuel injected Continental 550. And what it's showing us is a couple things. One here is they call it the average EGT, an average of all the cylinders. We can just think of it as one cylinder, that's fine. So here's our exhaust gas temperature curve. So you can see up here, this is the hottest, this is the coolest. Hot, cool. Numbers are not important, but if you want to see the numbers over here, the peak for them in this engine where the probe is installed happens to be about 1525. Again, it doesn't matter, it's just because it's where they put the probe. When I had my original EGT, the probe was pretty low on the number 4 stack, I think it was. No, number 3, down low on 3. When I installed my 6 probe, I put them up 2 inches down. So, it's not even the same. All right, average cylinder head temperature. This is the brake horsepower. So this is right here. This blue line is where that brake horsepower peaked out. That is our best power. Okay? All right. And then down here, this is like our miles per gallon, but it's a little backwards. It is backwards. It's called brake-specific fuel consumption. The lower it is, the better it is for you spending money. That means that this is your highest miles per gallon is down here. You're getting the most horsepower for the least amount of fuel.
Makes sense.
All right, so now we'll look at back up and look a little bit more. So now we know that right here is our best power. And I know that because it's peaked out on the best horsepower curve. But in order to get the best horsepower, we can see that it's not really the most economical because it's here and not down here. All right. Now we can look at the green line. That's my best economy. Why is it the best economy? Well, because it's down here at the lowest spot. I don't have a lot of horsepower, right? My horsepower curve fell off, but still, best horsepower for the fuel I'm burning. And then we can look at some temperatures. My cylinder head temp, nice and low. EGT temp is low, but that's not important right now because we're not worried about that temp. It's telling us something else. Cylinder head temp is something we concern ourselves with raw temperature. We don't want it to be more than 400 degrees. Now, Continental and Lycoming are going to let you give you red lines above that, but in reality, you own an airplane, you don't want to see over 400 degrees. And if you do, you don't want to see it for very long, just on a climb out or something, and then you want to be done with that business. So anything over 400, that's bad. And by the way, let's see, 400 is right here. So I'm saying 400. Continental, Lycoming, they're like, oh yeah, you go a little more above that. 380 is better for me. So I consider my personal red line is 400 for my cylinders. 380 is where I want to max out at. But you can see that this average cylinder head temp spent a lot of its life above 400 degrees if you're following this here. All right, let me see. Blue line is my best power. I think I already did that. Green was, did that, best economy. And then red line is our peak EGT, because we're going to talk about peak EGT and what that means a little bit. And the star is the max CHT. So that's right there. That is where the cylinder is suffering the most. It has the highest temperatures. We've put the internal pressures the highest. So that peak power pressure is at the worst spot for this. You are punishing that cylinder. We've got cylinder head temps exceeding 420 degrees. All right, so keep in mind this is leaner, richer. All right. Everybody's got this, yes.
And that's considering that there's no change in RPM.
No, this is very specific at 25 inches of manifold pressure at 2,500 RPM. This is one specific setting
Okay.
for this particular aircraft and what Continental put
The
together.
only thing that changes is the mixture.
Only thing I'm going to change in this scenario. This is a snapshot.
Got
If
it.
you were continue to run the engine at 25 inches manifold pressure at 2,500 RPM, this is what it's going to look like. I don't happen to know this particular engine well enough to know what is its red line, what is its percent power. This might be way up there in percent power. It could be well over 75, 80%. I think it's got to be really close to it. And again, it would also depend upon, it depends upon the altitude. No, it doesn't. It's probably a high power setting. That'd be something to know. I have to look that one up. Okay. Everybody got me so far?
One more thing.
Sure.
So snapshot. So there's a leaner and a richer side. Does that mean at 2,500 RPM? I'm still confused.
I'm gonna go there.
Okay, cool.
So I want you just to know what I've covered. I'm not gonna even change the slide. We're still talking about this slide. Okay, so we talk about richer and leaner. We have to have a reference point. What is rich? What is lean? And that reference point is always taken right here at peak EGT. Okay? So we start with peak EGT. So anything, it's backwards on the slide, I want to point the right way. So I take off and I'm flying and I've got this at 25 inches at 2,500 RPM. Not that that's important. Then I start pulling out the mixture. Okay? It's probably, I've just taken off. Now it's kind of designed, the engine, the setup, so that as we're taking off, we want to be economical or we want power? I want power. That engine's running over here. Right? It's on the blue line. It is running hard. CHT temps, they're up here. Right? It's going to be somewhere in this little area right here. It's not right on the line. It's somewhere right up here. High EGT, cylinder head temps. We got high brake horsepower. Specific fuel consumption, forget about it. My airplane, when I'm climbing out, I'm at 18 gallons an hour. And I only have an 0470. This is a 550. So I'm at 18 gallons an hour climbing out. Right? So this is dumping some fuel in. When I set up my airplane for cruise at altitude, I'm at 11. So, there's a difference between 7 gallons per hour in this range here on my smaller engine. So, all right, so we're climbing out. I level off because, say we didn't go too high because that creates a whole different scenario because you have to kind of lean as you go up. But we level off and set it up, set my throttle is set for 25 inches. I pulled my propeller back to 2,500 RPM. Boom, those things are set. Now I'm going to grab the red knob and I'm going to start messing with it. Right now it's right about here. Okay? Somewhere in this near the blue line and the star, kind of best power to get to where I was going. And now I'm going to start pulling back the mixture. And as I pull back the mixture, it's going to get leaner, right? And I'm going to watch my exhaust gas temperature gauge, and it's going to get higher and higher and higher and higher and higher and higher until it peaks out. Then I'm going to keep pulling on that just for fun, and it's going to start getting a little cooler, a little bit cooler, a little bit cooler, a little bit cooler. So when we talk about rich of peak, lean of peak, these are terms that we use a lot. Rich of peak, lean of peak. Peak what? EGT. That's pilot speak. That should be our speak too, so we can talk to them. It's, hey man, I'm running, where are you running? Man, 25, 50 degrees, rich of peak, ROP. That's where most books are going to tell you to run. That's where a lot of books tell you to go. That's where a lot of pilots feel like. And why do they want to run 50 degrees rich of peak? Don't write this down, right? Why? Because you go a little bit rich of peak, well, you cooled off that exhaust temp gas just a little tiny bit. The cooler's better, wouldn't you agree? Okay.
You would think so.
You think so,
Yeah.
but that, I'm telling you, that is. You ask most pilots, where do you like to fly? 25, 50 degrees rich of peak. Don't want to be flying around peak. I'm not crazy, Okay. 25, 50 degrees. So down here, I think that's the fuel flow. Where's my I know somewhere around here I've got it marked out. Thought I did on this one. Oh, sorry, it goes this way. Okay, so this peaks out right here at 1525. So if I were to run 50 degrees, rich of peak. So again, if I found peak, if I pulled out my mixture, EGT is going up, 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 up. It starts to go the other way. Oh, no, go right back there. Yeah. Okay, peak EGT. Right? I used the mixture to do that because we were way over here, running really rich. We're way over here, running really rich to take off. And the carburetors, fuel injection, they're set up to do that. They want to dump fuel in, right? And doing that keeps us out of a detonation range. It's a safe place to be under these high power settings. So, all right, so we've got that. Now I'm going to start pulling back the mixture, pulling back the mixture, pulling back the mixture. It gets to right about here. Oh, that's peak. I don't want to run. Okay, we're going to richen it up a little bit because that's what most people are taught. Richen up about 25 degrees. So here's 1525. So that'd be 25. That'd be 50 degrees. Rich of peak. That's going to put us right here. How you like that? Where? Right in this little area. What does this little area do for my cylinder temps?
Red line.
Killing your cylinders. But that's where most people are taught. And brake horsepower. Oh, you're getting a horsepower. Don't worry about that. Fuel consumption. Yep, you're sucking it down. All right, and that's where most people are taught. So again, the takeaway from that little thing is if I said 25 degrees rich of peak, 25 degrees of what? What gauge? Everybody got that? It's the EGT gauge.
So would you say it's, I guess, better to run it, if you're going to run 25 degrees peak, the other way, go lean?
Okay, so
I mean, you may not be making
this is where when I went to light combing school, I think I told you guys this. There was the guy in the class, who's the smartest guy? It was the NASA guy. I forget his name, but really a great guy too. Editor for Kit Planes, and he was the NASA flight director. I thought him and the instructor were going to start throwing blows, man. And these were not physically, not mean people, and the reason why is because the light combing guy said, you don't run lean at peak. Don't do it. You'll just destroy the engine. But here you've got another guy who is significantly researched and knew what he was talking about, because he does. And the point being, cool is cool.
Yeah.
And that's the new way of thinking. Cool is cool. It doesn't matter if you're cool here or cool here. It doesn't matter if you're cool here or cool here. Cool is cool. This is just a brake horsepower, but cool over here gets you on the green line.
Yeah.
All right. Now, there's one thing about this, and that is if you're at high power settings and you start running it lean, remember our fuel ratings, 80, 87, 100, 130. What happens when you go on the lean side?
You get slower.
That number gets lower. What was that? What is that number in fuel?
Ease of detonation.
The detonation. So if I lean it, what am I doing to my octane rating, performance number rating?
Dropping it.
I'm dropping it, so I'd be very careful with that. That's why you don't go lean of peak at high power settings.
Gotcha.
High power settings, we stay on the rich side, and then once we're in cruise and we drop down to 65% power, it's fair game. You just do what you want. You'll be fine. I shouldn't say do what you want, you'll be fine. Lean of peak is good. This is what's my buddy there always talk about.
Yeah, rich of peak on climb, and then lean of peak.
Well, let me fill that in a little bit, but you're right, yeah. I was thinking of the guy on the podcast.
Mike Bush.
Thank you, Bush. Mike Bush. And who's the other guy? Because I really like that guy on that podcast. Anyway, they talk about 182s. 182s are notorious for having the worst mixture distribution of any aircraft ever made. You got 6 cylinders, you have 1 carburetor all in the way in the back. So it comes up the back, it's right next to the firewall, the carburetor, and then it goes down rails on right and left side. Go, oh, there's the 1.3, the 2.4, and the 5.6. And so the middle cylinders are if I set it up and I leaned it out, these are going to be at peak. These are like rich at peak, and those are lean at peak. So it's like you're flying everything. Guys like me.
So averages out.
What's that?
Don't buy a carbureted 180.
If you're into this stuff and you're like, freaking out, but they work fine. Okay, there's a point I was going to make here. So that's it. All right, so we'll go with what you were saying because that was what I was going to talk about anyway. So you were asking, all right, so yes. So for takeoff, high power settings, everybody agrees. Nobody is disputing this.
Mm-hmm.
High power settings, you want to be rich. Rich of peak is how we talk about it.
Okay.
All right. Once you're cruising, and if your engine has good fuel distribution, you can start running lean of peak. So if we take a look at some pilot operating handbooks on how to operate engines, remember a lot of these engines didn't come with EGT gauges at all. So how do you lean? And I have the exact wording like somewhere around here. Let me see. I might have actually deleted it. I'm like, I'm not getting into that. All right. In general, most books agree with this. You lean it until the engine runs rough, and then enrichen it till it smooths out. So you're kind of using your butt on this one.
That sounds scary. Just go.
All right, so here's the fun part. I've got that in my airplane. And I can lean it out, and I got a veneer, which means you rotate it so it's like very precise. And I'll watch my EGTs. And by the way, this has a lean function find. You can get in the computer, you hit these buttons, and it'll tell you lean find, and it'll start flashing at you when one cylinder actually peaked out because it knows what you're doing. I'm trying to lean, so it's watching all the ones, and you're pulling back, and one peaks and it stops. It'll flash at you. That one it did it. That's the one, right? So I'll know, and then I can enrich in it. How much I want to, 50 degrees. I always go 75. You'll see the chart in a second. So 75 degrees. Okay, I did all that, set it all up, and then I'll look at my fuel flow because I have fuel flow gauge now, and that'd be my fuel flow, right? So I can take my pilot operating handbook, which has all these charts, which tells me if you're at this altitude, at this manifold pressure setting, at this RPM, and leaned out properly, this is how many gallons per hour you should be using. All right, so I did all that. Write it all down. Okay, now I try it again. Full rich, not looking at anything. Just kind of got my eyes, just pull it back, a little rough, push it back in. Okay, smooth. Oh, damn it, the numbers are exactly the same.
Yeah.
So you just wasted all the money on the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could save myself $9,000.
Uh-huh.
Damn expensive TV. So, yeah, it's funny how these old books actually kind of work. Where you have to be careful, though, is like I said, for the books that say lean to peak and enrich in 25 degrees. That'll put you right here.
Okay.
75 will put you over here. So we got 50, what was that? 15, 25, it's 25, 50, 75. 75 puts you over here.
Okay.
So,
And then you, like, on that first dial that you hit, the exhaust gas temperature,
mhm.
you set the peak exhaust temperature on climb? Is that
No, never, because that's max power.
Okay. When did you set it? You said it again?
Level off.
Level off. Okay.
Level off and power reduction. You don't want to be doing big leaning stuff unless you're below 65% or below. Because you cruise
Okay.
at 65%,
Below.
around there, yes. All right, now to complicate things a little bit, since you asked that question, as you take off, you're at sea level-ish, around here. If I'm going to 12,000 feet, what's going to happen to my mixture as I'm climbing?
It's gonna be down yourself.
I'm just gonna be dumping more. It's just gonna keep doing this. I mean, it's just gonna be dumping across all the way down here until it,
Yeah.
super rich. I'm just wasting fuel. This is gonna be brake horsepower will be dropping off. This will just be climbing up. Okay, I don't want that. So you do have to lean as you're climbing, but you're not going to be looking for peak or anything like that. What you do is you just look, hey, I just took off. My EGT is at 1650, and you're climbing, you look over, and you haven't touched anything, you're just climbing, and now it's not 1650 anymore. It's, is it going to get hotter or colder? Colder. Now it's at 1500. Well, I'll just pull it back till I see the 1650 again.
Okay.
You know, and so I'm going to be running it over here somewhere. So that's just a pilot thing. You as a mechanic need to understand the, number one, don't perpetuate the myth of 50 degrees rich of peak. That's bad. Number two, when I say 25 degrees lean of peak or 50 degrees lean of peak or 100, whatever, lean of peak, rich of peak, you need to know I'm talking about this upper curve right here. Peak is EGT. If I'm talking about cylinder head temp and I say, oh, you should run your cylinder heads about 100 degrees rich of peak, well, we don't normally say that, but I would specify cylinder head temp down or RPM, because sometimes I'll talk to you, we're going to be doing some stuff. I'll say, well, you want 25 RPM rich of best RPM or something like that. So we'll do that. All right, so I got some more stuff in here. That was Continental. These are Lycoming sheets. Maybe this makes a little more sense to you. So I added the lines again. So again, you can see it's pretty much the same thing. So this is the 50 degrees rich of peak. That's 50 degrees lean of peak, because peak is what? Peak, what gas am I talking about? EGT. So we have peak EGT, and they're saying this is the best economy range. This over here is the best power range. But you can see that 50 degrees rich of peak, 25 degrees is terrible on this engine. Because what is this curve here? Baking those cylinders. Just killing them. So 25, that's horrible. 50, still not great. 75, yeah, I'm using some fuel, but I'm saving the engine, which, there's the saying that, well, fuel is cheaper than an engine. Yes, it is. So yeah, this is my max power range. I'm running over here. When I'm taking off, I'm over here in this area. So you can see that, but it's the same chart. Percent power. What's that?
That little dip in fuel consumption, how it goes from
Here?
So like how it dips down and then starts to climb back up.
Okay, so again, this is your brake specific fuel consumption, which is what it said. It's like miles per gallon.
Okay.
So your best miles per gallon is right here.
Okay.
When you move it this way, your power curve drops off so far that the plane slows down so much that now it takes you so long to get where you're going that you're going to use more fuel.
Okay, gotcha.
It's almost like a car that gets the best gas mileage at about 40 miles an hour instead of 25.
Yeah, exactly. And then, as you increase your speed, well, then I'll just go faster. Well, then you have wind resistance and everything. So, yeah, it's exactly what it is. All right, I think what is this chart telling me?
Cylinder head.
Huh?
Made it bigger on the
I did, but yeah. But yeah, I guess. And I drew a line here showing something. I don't know what the hell it's showing.
The max cylinder
I'm not
head
sure.
temp?
Oh, this is based upon EGT.
Yeah.
So I just went the same on either side. All right, so to add a little bit of controversy to all this, there are those that say, well, fuel is cheaper than an engine. Why would you ever run lean of peak? Why would you ever do it? And the reason why lean of peak is so scary for so many people is because of detonation. We don't know when it happens, and it can eat up an engine. And so you now know that the leaner the fuel is, the octane rating, so to speak, changes. We don't talk about that with 100 low lead, but you can certainly see it with the 80 87s or the 100 130s, what they used to be called. They just changed the name and make it simple. You can see that leaner is a little scarier. There's the saying of, fuel is a cooling agent. Well, I don't like that anymore. I don't like saying fuel is a cooling agent. Sure it is. It's not a lie. Fuel does cool. The chart tells you right there, if I add more fuel, what happens to my temperatures?
Goes down.
They go down. But what happens if I take away the fuel?
Go back up.
They go back up and then they start going back down. So add a bunch of fuel, you'll cool it. Add a bunch of air, you'll cool it. So you got cooling at both ends. What you do have on the lean side that you don't have on the rich side is all the lead being wasted in the engine. And that's a big deal to a lot of people. People who spend their life with fuel injected engines, who, especially if you have a Continental, I shouldn't say especially with the Continental, but I think GAMI specializes in Continental. The people who made the fuel, I think they kind of got their start in modifying Continental engines where they would flow match all the nozzles, the fuel injection nozzles. And so I think everybody who runs a fuel injected Continental has GAMI injectors on them. And what they do is they match it so that when you're looking at this chart over here, where my poor little 182, they're, look all over the place. This is what it looks like with a GAMI engine. They're just, and you get these complaints from pilots. Hey, I was flying the other day, man. I was like 10 degrees difference on my EGT. Did you fix that? You're like, what? So, yeah. Hey, if you got the money, I got the time. So, those people are able to really pull back lean. My engine starts running carbureted. They run rough as soon as you get back in here at all. And of course, there's this whole thing about what is that roughness. For the longest time, they were saying that roughness you feel is cylinders dying off. It's like you're not, I've got a 6-cylinder engine. I've leaned it out. You lost a cylinder. Now it's not. Now they're saying that it's just an imbalance of power because one is still up high on the power curve, another one's dropping down because of the mixture imbalance. So,
Question.
yeah.
If you were straight leaning out and if your engine were susceptible to detonation of some form, what would you see on the CH2 and EGT?
Run away.
Both of them.
Both of them. Cylinder head temp's going to run away.
Cylinder head, yeah, I think yes, and I thought maybe the exhaust gas temp might go down.
I know. I was thinking it could go down. I don't want to find out.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I think it would go down.
Okay.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. Yeah.
Leading to roughness, where would that actually fall in that chart?
Wow. I think, of course, it depends. If you have a carbureted engine,
What's sufficient?
just outside the best economy range, right somewhere in here. I'm guessing. I really am.
That's because there's not enough fuel mixed in.
You have an imbalance of power, so it starts shaking,
Uh-huh.
and so you bring it in, and so as you enrich it a little bit, they even out.
So you're saying that it would probably be to the left of that chart, and then as you bring it back in, where
It's on the lean side of peak for
Yeah.
sure.
so as far as that first smoothness, we're to the lean side still.
As far as being under the peak.
Yeah,
Or
a
is
little
that
bit.
closer to peak, I think.
It's. I was gonna. If I had to throw a number at, I'm saying 25 to 50 lean. But it depends on the engine. Like mine is so bad, I'm almost back to peak. Because when
It's
I,
still technically good because if exhaust doesn't matter, then
it's cylinder head temp.
it's the cylinder head temps.
Yep.
But it's still pretty low given the chart.
With the engine monitor, you can actually pick up a 10 or 20 RPM drop before it starts to
Yeah.
feel.
You can. I can't.
Yeah.
Well, I have a constant speed. That's why. So he doesn't. So I won't see an RPM change.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So in some ways that's easier to do. I don't. I just feel the roughness and the manifold can go down a little bit, but not by much.
Okay.
Rather than pushing all the buttons that give you that
I've-
computerized stuff, I usually just back it up until I see it drop at 10 or 20 RPM and then go back.
See, that's good. So what he's doing is he's on the power, so he's pulling it back till he drops the power. So he's right up in here. So he sees a little bit of drop in power, and then richens it up a little bit. So depending on where you are on that curve, you're,
Probably right on the ridge.
right in here. Which, hey, that's a good place to keep your cylinders happy and get to where you're going. I mean, your specific fuel consumption is looking good. That's, yeah. Let me see.
Exhaust gas.
Let's go through a couple slides here, just kind of. What is this one? Because I thought it was really good. Chart of best power mixtures for different power settings. Same engine, different power settings. So right here we're at 450 to 550 horsepower. This is 375 to 475. This is 400 horsepower. So this is obviously a hell of an engine. It's bigger than a 985 Pratt & Whitney. Probably a big radial engine. So best power happens to be at, let me see, correction factor. Oh, here's my ratios down here. So they're just not converted to 15 to 1. But if the mixture stayed the same, best power is right here for this RPM. You got to change it at this RPM. You got to change it at that RPM. And the point that I would just leave this up here for is you can't set your mixture and then start messing around with your throttle. It changes because then the RPM changes, and then the because what they're doing here, they're changing RPM, and then when the RPM changes, you're talking about your peak pressure point is changing. So you got to readjust that because of the RPM. Not a test question on there. Percent relative horsepower. Affects the fuel air. FA is fuel air ratio. Get used to that because I'm going to write that a lot. Fuel air ratios on power at constant RPM. Now it's just showing the fall off on the horsepower curve. So this is this one I think is backwards now. Lean and richer. So A is on the lean side, so we'd call that lean best power, and B would be on the rich side, so rich best power. So it's just on the other each side of the curve. Not a big deal. Yeah, that's what I just said. Lean best power, rich best power. Red line shows best economy. Why is it best economy? Because the specific fuel consumption is at its lowest. Yeah, I almost took this one out. This just shows the different spread of on one specific engine. This is GAMI, people who brought the new fuel and make the injectors. They're the leaders in this stuff. And it just shows the spread between this EGT and this EGT over here are just so far apart. And this is, I think their point was going to be a engine without their things. All right, circle back around. Let me think. Go back to these charts. Like these. All right, are we clear on this? It's very, very important. Okay, so we're talking about where we want our fuel mixtures. And we have to understand what to tell pilots and how to work this. We also want to understand that as we change the mixture, we change the power of the engine. The engine is not designed or set up or even wants to be right here at, where's my brake horsepower? Right here, at the peak horsepower all the time. We're going to talk a lot more about this, but the carburetor is actually designed to run through an arc where at startup and idle through a certain percentage, it's very rich. And then it automatically leans itself out in around the 65% curve, and it goes back up rich at the 100%. So on both ends of the carburetor operating spectrum, idle and full power, it runs rich. It's designed to do that. And in the middle, it's designed to run lean, all on its own, if they can do that. So, all right, we got all that.
Got it.
All right, I guess your brains are probably full.
So it makes sense with a butterfly valve.
What?
It makes sense with a butterfly valve on a carburetor.
But that's air. So we're talking about fuel.